now joined by Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast. Dr. Breakfast, thank you so much for your time once again here on the SABC channel.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, before we talk about the statement that was released by the various parties, against what the DA is saying, I mean, the EFF hosted its Siyabonga rally this afternoon. I don't know how much of that you listened to it, but, Party leader Julius Malema saying that they are not going to be entering into any coalition because white people clearly don't want to work with them. Obviously, some would interpret that as referring to the DA. What do we make of his utterances saying the EFF is going to go it alone? The EFF cares more about the people than these white political parties.
Yeah, first of all, though I'm not a psychologist, but I get the sense that Julius Malema was very angry when he was making his speech, maybe because there have been some people in some quarters within the EFF that have been calling for him to, because the party has not done the way it should have. I got the sense that there was a lot of justification by Malema in terms of how the party has performed, also with regard to the relationship between the party and former President Zuma, and also the posture of the party with regard to foreign nationals. He was spitting fire. He was using I would say, a shotgun approach, shooting all over the show. And also, sending a warning to the deployees of the EFF that if they don't get the job done, the EFF will recall them.
At the IFP and the ANC saying the IFP were sellouts, in fact, probably referring to the partnership that we saw recently in KZN. IFP obviously saying that it's not a coalition, as it were. Your take on that?
I'm not sure about that analysis. Of course, I mean, political parties, they don't have to be friends to join forces. What brings them together should be promoting development for the majority. Coalition formations by nature, they are marriages of inconvenience. But at the same time, his analysis, it might be misplaced that the IFP alongside the ANC have joined forces, if I can quote him verbatim, to block the EFF. I'm not sure about that. Though the decision by the two political parties was made at national level and brought down to the bottom.
And if you listened to the IFP's Hlabisa, I mean, he was at pains to say that they did try, to speak to various political parties, but some of the smaller parties were just asking for untenable, making untenable requests, wanting to be mayors, etc., even though they brought very little to that potential partnership. But let's move on to this now. Action SA, the FF Plus, ACDP and UDM have released a joint statement reacting to the DA's position on coalitions. Now, they're saying that the DA is placing coalitions at risk. Your take on this?
I think there seems to be a lack of trust amongst these political parties. I think they need to bear in mind that, like I said earlier on, they don't have to be friends to work together. I think the first thing that must come to their minds is the interests of citizens, namely service delivery. None of them should think that they are superior than other political parties. I think they really need to put aside their differences, because they are tactical differences. They're not strategic differences. Because even if there is a rerun, in my opinion, in those municipalities, I can bet my bottom dollar that will not change the political picture. The results will be the same, because at the moment, the political environment is fragmented, and it is that political fragmentation that gives rise to these coalition negotiations.
Dr. Breakfast, given that South Africa will inevitably have to follow a multi-party approach and system, what would it take for parties to cooperate? I mean, we're seeing these joint statements happening now. The deadline is looming. We're talking about next Tuesday. And yet we're still seeing that there is that level of, not cooperating with each other. It still seems that parties are prioritizing themselves and not the duty at hand.
My view is that South Africa doesn't have a long-standing history of coalition formations. The ones that we saw were basically in the early 1900s, 1924, 1933, and after that the National Party dominated the political landscape until the ANC rose to prominence in 1994. Then the ANC experienced a decline in the early 2000s until now. So this is a recent phenomenon, in my opinion, which comes from countries like Holland, Germany, Greece, and so on. So I think the only way out of this crisis that we have of a deadlock is to have a piece of legislation and have an independent body that will demand accountability from these political parties when they strike deals than the way things are at the moment. Because one of the weaknesses of the Constitution is that it doesn't have a provision with regard to the management of these power-sharing arrangements.
And how would that, that process then run? I mean, you talk about a piece of legislation and even an independent body probably overseeing this process. How do you look that being formatted and at which level would that then be introduced into this process?
Well, I think SALGA can lead the process because it is responsible for local government. But I think also the public must be taken on board because elections are an expression of the will of the people. So the way things are at the moment is not the way things should be because you only have national leaders discussing how these power-sharing arrangements should be. And in my opinion, that is tantamount to elitism because it omits the involvement of the public. And that is a significant omission.
So you bring in the public there, and we all often talk about activism, from citizens, particularly the electorate, those that actually went to vote. With this looming deadline of Tuesday, we still have a lot of council that are hung. No agreements have been made in terms of coalition. What's the next step? What happens then? And what can citizens do within their control, if anything?
Well, I think according to the Municipal Structures Act, after the 14 days, then there needs to be a rerun. But at the same time, I don't think that we must be too hard on ourselves as, as South Africans. I mean, this is, like I said, this is a recent phenomenon. I think maybe our founding fathers and mothers of our democracy, they omitted to, include how these power-sharing arrangements should be run. No wonder things are the way they are at the moment. So these are some of the conversations I think as a country we need to have as we go forward.
Fantastic. Dr. Breakfast, always a pleasure to have you here on the show and just giving us that analysis. Pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll continue with our leading